The desert road looked empty enough to swallow a person and their story without leaving a trace. Wind moved across the open land like a restless animal, lifting dust from the dry ground and pushing it along the cracked pavement. The night sky stretched wide and cold above the desert, filled with quiet stars that watched everything but helped no one. Emily Carter lay on the side of that road, half buried in sand and gravel. Her body barely moved. Every breath came shallow and broken, like her ribs could not decide if they wanted to keep fighting or simply give up. Blood stained the pale sand beneath her, spreading slowly as the wind pushed grains of dust across her torn clothes. Her head throbbed with a dull, heavy pain. When she tried to open her eyes fully, the world blurred into shapes and shadows. Just hours earlier, she had believed she was safe. Just hours earlier, she had trusted someone. Now she lay alone in the desert, trying to remember how everything had gone so terribly wrong. Emily tried to move her arm. The effort sent a sharp wave of pain through her shoulder, forcing a quiet cry from her lips. Her fingers dragged weakly across the gravel beside her, scratching the road as if she could somehow pull herself back into life. Her voice came out as nothing more than a broken whisper. "Please, someone." The desert gave no answer. Wind pushed through the empty land, rattling dry weeds and brushing across the road like a quiet warning. Miles away, the faint hum of a passing car echoed through the night, but it never came close enough to see her. Tears mixed with blood on her cheek. Her mind drifted back to the moment everything had shattered. The man she loved had stood over her with anger burning in his eyes. The man she once trusted had turned into someone she did not recognize anymore, and his voice had been cold and cruel as he pushed her toward the truck. "You think anyone cares about you?" he had said. The words echoed inside her head now, like a cruel memory that refused to fade. "No one cares about you." Emily wanted to believe those words. Believing them felt easier than hoping someone might still come. Her strength faded quickly. The cold desert air wrapped around her body, stealing warmth from her skin. She tried to crawl forward, dragging herself a few inches across the gravel, but her arms trembled too hard to keep moving. The sky above her looked endless. The stars did not blink. Her vision slowly darkened around the edges. Then something changed. At first it sounded like part of the wind, a slow rhythm moving across the land. Emily blinked weakly, trying to focus. The sound came again. Hoofbeats, slow and steady. The sound grew closer until a dark shape appeared against the pale moonlight. A horse moved quietly along the road, its breath visible in the cool night air. Sitting tall in the saddle was a man whose silhouette looked almost unreal against the desert sky. The horse slowed as it approached the road. Then it stopped. For a moment, everything was silent again. The man leaned slightly forward in the saddle, his eyes narrowing as he noticed something lying near the edge of the road. Something that should not have been there. Without hesitation, he swung down from the horse. His boots hit the ground with a soft thud, and he moved quickly toward her. The cowboy knelt beside Emily, his shadow falling across her face. Up close, he could see the bruises spreading across her skin, the blood on her clothes, and the way her breathing struggled to stay steady. His jaw tightened. For a moment he said nothing. Then his voice came out low and gentle. "Hey, can you hear me?" Emily forced her eyes open. The man above her looked tall and broad-shouldered, his face rough from years under the sun and wind. His hat cast a shadow across his eyes, but his expression held something she had not seen in a long time. Concern. His hands hovered carefully near her shoulder, as if afraid to cause more pain. "You're not dying tonight," he said quietly. His voice carried calm certainty. "I won't leave you." Those words reached her through the fog of pain and exhaustion. They sounded strange at first, almost impossible. No one had spoken to her like that in a long time. Emily tried to speak, but the only sound that escaped her lips was a weak breath. The cowboy quickly removed his coat and wrapped it gently around her shaking body. The fabric felt warm compared to the cold desert air. "My name's Caleb," he said softly. He moved carefully, sliding one arm beneath her back and another under her legs. The moment he lifted her, Emily gasped as pain shot through her ribs. "Oh, easy," Caleb murmured. "I got you." He carried her to the horse and slowly lifted her into the saddle before climbing up behind her. One arm held the reins, while the other supported her, so she would not fall. The horse turned away from the road and began moving across the desert trail. The ride felt endless. Emily drifted in and out of awareness as the rhythm of the horse's steps carried them through the quiet night. Each time her breathing grew weak, Caleb spoke again in that same steady voice. "Stay with me. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt strange in her mind. She had not heard it spoken with honesty in years. After what felt like hours, a faint light appeared in the distance. A small ranch stood alone beneath the wide sky. A wooden cabin sat near a weathered barn, its windows glowing softly against the darkness. Caleb guided the horse toward the house and quickly dismounted once they reached the porch. He lifted Emily again, careful not to move her injured ribs, and carried her inside. Warm air wrapped around them as they stepped into the cabin. The room smelled of wood smoke and coffee. A small fire crackled inside the stone fireplace, spreading heat through the quiet space. Caleb placed her gently on the bed. Emily flinched as he began cleaning the blood from her arm with a damp cloth. "Easy," he said again. "No one's hurting you here." His hands moved slowly and carefully, cleaning each wound with patience. Every time she winced, he paused to give her a moment to breathe. Emily watched him through half-open eyes. His kindness felt confusing, suspicious, almost dangerous. She had learned long ago that kindness could disappear without warning. But exhaustion finally pulled her under. Her eyes closed. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Caleb Dawson sitting in a wooden chair beside the bed. A shotgun rested across his lap as he watched the door and windows, guarding her like she mattered. Morning came slowly. Soft sunlight slipped through the dusty windows and filled the small cabin with warm light. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air. Emily opened her eyes carefully. But for a moment she forgot where she was. Then the pain in her ribs returned, reminding her of everything. The room around her looked simple and quiet. Wooden walls, a small table, a stove near the window. The fire from the night before had burned low, leaving faint warmth in the room. Footsteps moved near the doorway. Caleb appeared holding 2 cups of coffee. He looked slightly unsure when he saw her awake. "You hungry?" he asked. Emily shook her head slowly, as speaking still felt difficult. Caleb nodded as if he expected that answer. "That's all right," he said. He placed 1 cup on the table and leaned against the wall for a moment. Then he looked back at her. "Just don't be scared," he added quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." Something inside Emily cracked open. Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. Her voice came out small and broken. "Why are you helping me?" Caleb looked down at the floor, but for a long moment he did not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a quiet sadness. "Because someone should have helped my sister once." He paused. "And nobody did." Emily watched him carefully. The pain in his words felt real. Caleb turned away quickly, as if hiding something he did not want her to see. But in that moment, Emily understood something important. For the first time since the desert road, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe she was not alone anymore. Well, maybe she might survive after all. The days that followed moved slowly across the quiet ranch, like the steady rhythm of the wind that never seemed to leave the open desert. Morning light filled the cabin gently each day, and with every sunrise, Emily felt a little more aware of the world around her. The pain in her ribs still reminded her of what had happened, but the heavy darkness that once filled her chest had begun to loosen its grip. Caleb Dawson never asked questions. Yet he moved through each day with calm patience, fixing fences, feeding horses, and working the land the same way he always had. Yet no matter how busy he seemed, he always checked on Emily. Sometimes he would simply step into the doorway and ask the same simple question. "You all right?" Emily often nodded quietly. At first, she barely spoke. The fear inside her still lingered like a shadow that refused to leave. But Caleb never pushed her. He cooked simple meals in the small kitchen, though most of them were not very good. The soup sometimes tasted like it had more salt than water, and the toast often came out burnt around the edges. Every time it happened, Caleb would look a little embarrassed. "Still learning," he would say with a quiet shrug. Emily found herself smiling the first time he said it. The sound surprised her. She had not heard her own laughter in a long time. Outside the cabin, the ranch stretched across miles of dry land. A weathered barn stood beside a wide corral where several horses rested under the open sky. Wind moved through the tall grass, carrying the distant sound of hooves and the creaking of old wooden fences. After a few days, Emily slowly began walking again. At first, it was only a few careful steps across the cabin floor. Caleb watched closely, but pretended not to notice, so she would not feel weak. By the end of the week, she could step outside. The sunlight felt warm on her skin as she stood on the porch, breathing in the open desert air. Caleb stood nearby, fixing a loose fence post. He glanced up when he saw her standing there. "Careful," he said gently. "Oh, your ribs are still healing." Emily held the porch railing and nodded. "I know." Her voice still sounded soft, but it no longer trembled the way it once had. She looked across the ranch, watching the horses move slowly near the barn. "They're beautiful," she said quietly. Caleb followed her gaze. "Best company I've ever had." Later that afternoon, Emily walked slowly toward the barn. The wooden doors stood open, letting sunlight pour inside. A dust floated through the air in soft, golden streaks. A brown horse lifted its head as she stepped inside, its dark eyes calm and curious. Emily reached out slowly and brushed her fingers across its neck. The horse snorted softly, but did not move away. Behind her, Caleb leaned against the doorway. "You talk to horses like people," Emily said. Caleb gave a small smile. "Animals don't lie," he answered. Emily looked at him for a moment. She wondered if people had ever been honest with him. Over the next several days, the ranch began to feel less like a hiding place and more like a home. Emily helped where she could. Sometimes she swept the porch. Sometimes she filled buckets of water for the animals. The simple work helped her mind stay quiet. But the nights were harder. Sleep did not come easily. More than once, Caleb heard her cry out from the bedroom as memories of the desert returned in her dreams. He never rushed into the room suddenly, and instead he knocked softly and spoke through the door. "It's all right. You're safe." Slowly, the panic would fade. One evening, Emily sat on the porch steps while the sun dipped low across the desert sky. Orange and red light stretched across the land, turning the distant hills into dark shadows. Caleb stepped outside and sat beside her. For a while, Neither of them spoke. The quiet between them felt comfortable. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "You didn't ask what happened," she said. Caleb looked out toward the fading sunlight. "You'll tell me when you're ready," he replied calmly. Emily stared down at her hands. Her voice came slowly. "He said no one would believe me." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. "He said I deserved it." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Caleb did not interrupt her. Emily continued, her voice shaking slightly. "I stayed too long. I kept thinking things would change." She paused. "But they never did." Caleb nodded quietly. But the desert wind moved through the grass around them. "You're here now," he said. Emily looked at him. "Why did you stop that night?" Caleb shrugged lightly. Felt wrong to keep riding when something looked out of place. Emily studied his face carefully. "You could have kept going." He shook his head. "No." His answer carried quiet certainty. Days passed. Emily's bruises slowly faded, though the memories behind them remained. But then, one evening, the peaceful routine of the ranch shattered. The distant sound of an engine rolled across the open land. Headlights appeared at the edge of the property, cutting through the darkness like sharp blades. Emily froze. Her heart pounded instantly. She knew that truck. The vehicle rolled toward the ranch gate and stopped with a loud crunch of gravel. The door slammed. A familiar voice shouted through the night. "Emily!" The sound of it sent fear rushing through her chest. Caleb saw the panic on her face immediately. "Stay inside," he said firmly. Emily could barely breathe. Her hands trembled as she stepped backward toward the cabin door. Outside, the man walked toward the house, anger filling his voice. "You think you can hide from me?" Caleb stepped forward into the yard. His boots moved slowly across the dirt as he approached the gate. The two men stood facing each other under the pale moonlight. Emily watched from the doorway, her body shaking. Her abuser laughed harshly when he saw Caleb. "You got no idea who you're dealing with, cowboy." Caleb remained calm. His voice stayed low and steady. "You need to leave." The man smirked. "That woman belongs to me." The words made Emily feel sick. Caleb's expression hardened slightly. "No one belongs to anybody." The wind blew harder across the land. For a moment, the desert seemed completely still, as if the land itself waited to see what would happen. The man stepped closer. "Are you gonna stop me?" Caleb did not move. He did not blink. His presence alone felt like a wall that would not break. Finally, the man looked around the empty ranch and spat into the dirt. "This ain't over." He turned sharply and walked back to his truck. The engine roared to life. Within seconds, the vehicle disappeared into the dark desert road. Emily's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the porch steps, tears spilling down her face. Caleb walked back slowly and sat beside her. He did not say anything at first. He simply stayed there while she cried. After a moment, he spoke quietly. "You're safe." Emily wiped her eyes, struggling to calm her breathing. Caleb looked toward the dark road where the truck had vanished. Then he repeated the same promise he had made the night they first met. "I won't leave you." For the first time since that terrible night on the desert road, Emily truly believed him. But deep down she knew something else too. The past had not finished with her yet. Life on the ranch slowly found its rhythm again after the night the truck came and went. While the desert wind continued to sweep across the open land, carrying the smell of dry grass and dust through the fences and fields. For a few days, everything seemed quiet, but the memory of that moment stayed close to Emily's mind. She knew the past was still somewhere behind her, but she also knew she was no longer facing it alone. Each morning, the sun rose over the wide desert horizon, painting the sky with soft orange light. Emily often stepped outside early, watching the horses move across the pasture while the land slowly woke. Her body had healed enough that she could work again. At first, Caleb tried to stop her. "You should rest," he told her one morning while fixing a loose barn door. Emily shook her head with a small smile. "I rested enough." She picked up a brush and walked toward the horses waiting in the corral. The animals had grown comfortable around her, while one of the older horses pushed its head gently against her shoulder as she brushed its coat. Caleb watched quietly from the barn doorway. There was something different in Emily now. The fear that once filled her eyes had softened. It had not disappeared completely, but it no longer controlled every step she took. Later that afternoon, Emily stood beside Caleb near the fence. "I need to do something," she said. Caleb looked at her. "What kind of something?" Emily took a slow breath. I need to tell the truth." Caleb understood immediately. "You mean the court?" Emily nodded. The idea clearly frightened her, but there was strength in her voice that had not been there before. Caleb placed one hand on the wooden fence. "You don't have to face it alone." Emily gave a small, grateful smile. "I know." Weeks passed before the court date arrived. During that time, Emily prepared herself slowly. Some nights she sat on the porch, staring at the stars, while Caleb worked quietly nearby. Other nights, she practiced telling her story out loud. Each time, the words felt easier to say. When the day finally came, they drove into the small desert town together. The courthouse stood near the center of town, a plain brick building surrounded by quiet streets. Emily felt her chest tighten the moment she stepped inside. Memories rushed back. Fear tried to pull her backward. But Caleb walked beside her the entire time. He did not speak much. He simply stayed close. Inside the courtroom, the man who hurt her sat across the room. His expression carried the same cold anger she remembered. For a moment, Emily felt her courage shake. Then she looked behind her. Caleb sat in the back row. His calm presence reminded her why she had come. When Emily stood to speak, the room felt heavy and silent. Her voice trembled at first, but she continued. And she told the truth about the night he beat her. She spoke about the desert road, the fear, and the moment she believed she would die alone. She told them everything. The courtroom listened quietly. When she finished, Emily sat down slowly. The waiting felt long. Finally, the judge spoke. The verdict was clear. Guilty. The word echoed through the room like the closing of a heavy door. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of fear anymore. They were tears of relief. Outside the courthouse, she stepped into the warm afternoon sunlight. For the first time in a long while, the air felt light around her. Caleb stepped out behind her. Emily turned and hugged him tightly. "You helped me do that," she said softly. Caleb shook his head. "You did it yourself." They drove back to the ranch as the sun slowly dropped toward the horizon. Life there continued, but something had changed. Emily was no longer just someone hiding from the past, but she was building something new. Over the following months, the ranch began to grow in ways neither of them expected. Emily started helping injured animals, the way Caleb always had. Word slowly spread through nearby towns that the ranch had become a safe place for animals that had been hurt or abandoned. Soon, more horses arrived. A few dogs. Even a frightened mule someone had rescued from a bad owner. The once quiet ranch filled with life. Emily painted bright sunsets on the old barn walls, adding color to the weathered wood. Caleb laughed the first time he saw it. "Never had artwork on the barn before," he said. Emily smiled. "Now you do." Caleb began teaching her how to ride. At first, Emily felt nervous climbing onto a horse, but Caleb stayed close beside her, guiding the reins gently. "You're doing fine," he told her. By the end of the first week, she rode confidently across the open field. the wind lifting her hair as the horse moved beneath her. The ranch slowly became a place of laughter and quiet peace. One evening, nearly a year after the night Caleb found her on the road, Emily stood near the fence watching the sunset. The sky glowed with soft gold and red colors stretching across the desert. Caleb walked over and stood beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Finally, Emily looked at him. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" Caleb thought for a second. Probably something awkward. Emily shook her head with a quiet laugh. "You said I wasn't dying that night." Caleb smiled slightly. I was pretty sure about that." Emily turned toward him. "You also said something else." Caleb waited. Emily's voice softened. "You said you wouldn't leave me." The desert wind moved gently through the tall grass around them. Caleb looked at her with the same calm kindness she had seen that first night. "I meant it," he said. Emily reached for his hand. Under the same stars that once watched her suffer on the desert road, she felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. Hope. And the wind carried softly across the ranch, moving through the fields and barns filled with rescued animals. Emily squeezed his hand gently. "You kept your promise," she said. Caleb looked out across the quiet land they now shared. Then he spoke the same words again. "I won't leave you." And this time both of them believed those words would last a lifetime.